All right, guys, let's do a quick review. Time travel. Is it possible? It depends, right? Three conditions need to be satisfied. The first one is time needs to be a continuum, which means that the future, the present, the past all need to exist at the same time, and they need to be just as real. And according to Einstein's theory of gravity, that's the way things are. And in all appearance, Einstein's theory has been proven time and time again. It passed every single test so far. So what that means is the future, the past, the present all exist at the same time. No future, no gravity, no past, no gravity. All right, so the first condition for time travel is satisfied. The next condition that needs to be satisfied is the space-time continuum needs to be curved. If it's flat, forget it. You can't do time travel. If it's curved, there's the possibility of shortcuts through wormholes. So that's the last one we're going to look at. The most important condition that needs to be satisfied is we have to have parallel universes, or else time travel is impossible, or else we are stuck in a static universe, which means that the act of time travel needs to create its own universes in order to overcome grandfather paradox or time travel paradoxes. So is there any evidence for the possible existence of these parallel universes? All right, so that's the direction we're headed right now. The first condition has been satisfied. This is the one that we're going to be investigating. The last thing we're going to look at is whether or not the space-time continuum is flat or curved. That's the last thing. That's the easiest thing. All right, so the movie Frequency is the one you will be tested on today.
Once in a decade, massive solar storms invade our atmosphere, disrupting global communications.
John, your dad's old ham radio. Go over to the den, huh? Plug it in.
And causing unexplained phenomenon.
WWYD, this is Frank Sullivan.
Hello? What did you say your name was?
Frank Sullivan.
Is this some kind of joke?
That will allow John Sullivan to talk to his father.
What do you say we tame this Bronco, huh? You and me, spirit and guts.
Who's been dead for 30 years.
How could it be?
I don't know, but we gotta be talking up the mother son spot of all time. I missed you so much. Well, tell me about yourself. Tell me about your life. I'm a cop. You're third generation firefighter. Come on, I thought you were gonna grow out of that cop phase.
What's going on, Satch?
Frank says that he's talking to Johnny on the radio in the future.
So, hey, little chief, there's somebody I want you to talk to.
Good night, John.
Good night there, chief.
Oh my God. Hello?
Something's wrong. Something we did changed the past.
Something happened to Mom.
Your mother what? No, she was murdered.
We gotta do something. Try to stop this guy. I mean, I know who he is, but I know where he's gonna be and what he's gonna do before he gets there.
Do I call the police? They're not gonna believe me.
You got his prints.
I want you to hide that wallet somewhere where nobody's going to find it for the next 30 years.
The end don't see in the time book.
It's in! I got it!
Wow. You gotta give me something I can believe.
Well, we've got to catch him in the act. And you can make that happen, Dad.
I'm not a cop. I'm a firefighter.
We can do it together. Remember, spirit and guts?
I love you, son.
I love you too, Dad.
All right, so this is actually a fairly difficult movie to analyze. All right, guys, what's the premise of the movie?
Is it that the main character was able to actually change the past?
All right, Kayla, say it again.
Was it that the main character was actually able to change the past?
All right, I'll give you 5 points for it. He's able to change the past how? All right, so what's the premise of the movie? Son is able to communicate with his dad, right? Using a ham radio. And the communication is taking place within a span of 30 years. So you got this time period, and that's like 30 years apart. So boom, boom, boom. So this time period is 30 years apart. All right, I'm gonna make T, delta T. This is the change in time. This is 30 years. All right, so that's what we got. And they're able to communicate back and forth. How are they able to communicate? They're using a ham radio, right? All right, so how's that ham radio able to make time communication through time possible? What's happening?
Was it that? Sorry.
Go ahead, April.
I thought you were asking a question. Was it the aurora, the little lights in the sky?
Okay, all right. So something is happening, right? Just before the communication takes place, there's they see the northern lights, right? And somehow some magic happens. They talk about northern lights appearing, and then shortly after that, they're able to communicate. All right. Now, ham radios use radio waves, right, in order to communicate. All right. Can you communicate with the past or the future using ham radio, radio waves, or cell phones? What do you think? Cell phones use microwaves, for example. Can you communicate with the future or the past using radio waves or microwaves? Yes or no?
No.
You can only communicate in the present using radio waves or microwaves. Microwaves is what we use while using cell phones, believe it or not, guys. All right, no, absolutely not. Now, for the information to travel backwards in time, it needs to travel faster than light. All right, if that's the case, microwaves or radio waves travel at the light speed. So you cannot communicate with the past using radio waves or microwaves, for that matter. Besides, if the radio waves or the microwaves were to travel faster than light, the communication would only be possible backwards in time. So it's a one-way information. You can only send the information back to the past, but you will not be able to receive information from the past. It's out of the question. So from that perspective, information is not traveling backwards and forwards in time using radio waves in this case. So it's out of the question. So if that's the case, how's the communication taking place through the timeline within a span of 30 years? The only way you can send the information back and forth is through a wormhole. All right, so no one is time traveling in this movie. That's the nice thing about it. But they're able to send the information back and forth. All right, who's the physicist in the movie? How many of you guys noticed that there was a physicist in the movie?
Was it the news reporter in the back of the TV?
Okay, he was on TV. He wasn't a news reporter, but he was. Yeah, he was being.
John Green.
Okay,
Like that?
I'll give you 5 points for that one. It's Brian Green. All right, Brian Green. Who's Brian Green? Remember, you guys have been watching his documentaries forever, and Brian Green in this movie is playing himself, Brian Green, and he's talking about the Northern Lights. And it's odd because the Northern Lights appear evidently according to the movie every time there's a wormhole, which is during the formation of a wormhole. There's this connection which is taking place. All right, so Brian Green is in the movie. He's also the science advisor, so they made sure that the movie was accurate to our understanding of time travel. All right, so this was really, really well made. All right, so what's happening is the information is traveling back and forth through a wormhole. Our wormhole appears, and then you got this connection that happens within a span. So the information travels back and forth within a span of 30 years. All right, somehow he sends the information, and the information is received at the same time. So they're able to localize the information to a certain point, so which is kind of weird. That was the problem that Millett had with this time travel machine. So in science fiction, they were able to solve that problem. It just travels back and forth. That's it. Okay, so so the time travel is taking place through a wormhole in the form of information being sent and received through this timeline. All right. So what happens when he sends the information back in time to his dad? And when dad acts on that information, so what happens? It changes the history, right? All right. Initially, his mom is alive, and then his mom dies, and there's a serial killer that these people are tracking. And the number of people he kills keeps changing every time he sends the information back. All right. So the act of time travel creates its own separate history, right? That's the way it should be. So did you guys see any grandfather paradoxes in this movie?
Yeah.
All right, so April, just explain what the paradox was.
There was a few of them where, like, I think they were both when Frank was freaking out from the past, he dropped his cigarette and it burned the desk, and then it transferred back to his son Johnny from the present time. That one, and then I noticed how Johnny was able. I don't know if that was considered one, but when Johnny was able to still remember both events, when his father did die and when his father was back alive. I know there was those, and then I think there was some other ones. Yeah, that's what I got so far.
All right, April, I'm going to give you 10 points for the explanations. All right, guys, whenever you're answering questions, and you guys are getting much, much better at it, sometimes, most of the time, you give the correct answer. I want you guys to refer back to the movie to back it up. All right, sometimes the movie deviates from our understanding of time travel. At that point, you have to say, hey, according to our understanding of time travel, this is what should happen, but in the movie, it doesn't happen that way. All right, case in point, sliding doors. All right, so when she ended up splitting into two parallel selves, and then in one version of the movie, obviously she ended up dying, and the other reality she survived. So you know that these are two separate life events and two separate realities, and they don't intersect. So what happens in one parallel reality does not influence anything on a different parallel reality, right? But in the movie, there was a deja vu experience. So you have to go back to the movie and say, well, this shouldn't happen, but in the movie, she had a deja vu experience. Some of you guys are doing a really good job with that, and some of you guys are kind of still not there as yet. So just go back to the movie and then either back it up or refute it. All right, so in this movie, here's what's happening. So he's sending in the information. He's obviously concerned about his mom. He's concerned about his dad. He wants his dad to be alive, and then mom dies. And then he keeps sending the information back. But as soon as somebody acts on it, what does he know? He knows that somebody acted on it, right? Because he could see the changes instantaneously. So if you were to send the information back in time to someone else like that, if somebody were to act on it, would you see the changes instantaneously in the way it's portrayed in the movie? Yes or no?
No.
Okay, why not?
Because you can't change the past.
All right, well, you can't change the past. Okay, so who said that?
Elizabeth.
Okay, Elizabeth, explain. When I said no, I need to know what your explanation is. It depends.
No, because
if you did, what would happen?
nothing.
All right, so okay, so if you could just change the past, what would happen? In the way it's
It would only change in that universe.
All right, so it would cause paradoxes, right? That's what you're getting at. All right, so if this is the only universe, if you were to send the information back in time, if somebody were to act on it, it would immediately cause paradoxes, right? So in that sense, it doesn't make sense. Only way it can make sense is when somebody acts on that information, it should create an immediate parallel history, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right, if it creates a parallel history, what happens to you after sending the information? Upon sending the information, when somebody receives it, acts on it, what happens is going to create a new parallel history, which means that the histories will split. And not only the histories will split, also you will split into those parallel histories. Got it? So the movie makes sense only if you're looking at the new reality from the perspective of one of those parallel selves from that particular parallel universe. All right? So which means that every time he actually sends the information back in time, he's creating all these parallel universes. He's also splitting into these parallel universes, and you're only looking at reality from one of those parallel universes where he could actually see the instantaneous change in time. Does that make sense? So this movie is kind of tough to actually, because you guys are looking at it visually, you don't see all these changes. So what's happening is every time he sends the information back, he's creating all these parallel universes. He's also splitting into these parallel universes. And you're only looking at what's going on from one of those parallel universes where it actually makes sense. So everything up here is to change instantaneously. Or else this movie would be a complete time travel paradox. All right. It's a weird movie. It's an interesting movie. All right, so let's move forward. Okay, so I'm gonna make this test available once again until midnight. All right, so let's get back to the premise of the movie. So what's the premise of the movie? Obviously, the premise of the movie is time travel. He's able to talk to his dad using a ham radio. Communication is taking place through a wormhole. So the time difference is 30 years apart. He's able to send back information. His dad is able to act on the information. And every time he does that, obviously they're creating these parallel universes. But because you guys are experiencing it visually, you don't really see the big picture. But if you think about it, it fits perfectly well with what we have been discussing so far. Once again, Brian Greene is the science advisor, not only one of the actors, but science advisor. So the physics is fairly accurate to what we've been discussing so far. All right,